the actual language interaction or whatever, that can be used as from an activity theoretical perspective. And I think, you know, I've been toying with the idea of really looking into Ritva, not Ritva and Grönström's model that dates from 1995. But I think it's a very interesting thing because there she brings for us, she didn't do it for language learning, you know, it's nothing to do with second language acquisition, but I think, and it would be interesting to know what you think about the possibility of using that, is that using some Bakhtin concepts and the idea of utterance and the meaning construction and so on, is to have a model as well that looks at voice and dialogue as an activity in its own right. And if we kind of superimpose the third kind of triangle to the two, I think we then have a completely unified model that we can start deconstruct and reconstruct all the time to better understand the interactions. So basically there, in our model, the subject this time is the speaker. The object, it's all based on dialogism and so on, but I think we are not going to go into that now. The object is the previous utterance on the object and so on. This is mediated by words. You have rules, speech genres, but I think the linguistic, the grammar, and so on could go there as well. And basically the outcomes of this activity is the utterance voiced by the speaker. So it's completely rooted in Bakhtin's social languages, heteroglossia and so on, but I think there's something there. So, but basically what she says is that all the rules there, it's working at the operation level of the activity system. And if you think about, you know, language acquisition or the production of forms or whatever, I think for me, I would think it is an operational, it's at the operational level. The actions, the voiced action or whatever, is the communicative action is what's going to transform the object into a new utterance and creating new possibilities for further linguistic development and so on. So I think it links quite neatly with Van Leer's idea. But then, at the same time, all that is rooted in the much more society context, which is the activity one. Okay, the community, the social group, and so on from there. So basically, what I'm trying to say here is that if we really want to, I think it's important to search for a unified theory and method that's going to allow us to look at a very complex system, because I think it's, I mean, Carol this morning reminded us that, you know, it's very complex. But sometimes by reducing the complexity, by just looking at a few little things, I think we're losing the big picture. And therefore our interpretation will not be the best. So we need to find ways of reducing without losing the big part. And this is where I think that trying to use those approaches, and if we could experiment and collect data and analyze it, that's probably where we'll make progress. Yeah, that's a bit. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Any questions, comments? There's one.
Yes, but I think that's why you need to be clear at which level you're looking at it, I think. So yeah, that's why I say it was a very crude thing. But I think I think one of the big problems when you try to operationalize activity theory is to define the boundaries of your activity system. And I think you need to be very clear which level you are, always to know, to locate. So basically, when you document your research, I think you have to say, I mean, that's my own, what are the boundaries of your system and how does it relate to another one? So in a way, the one I was showing there would probably have been at the meso level. So yes, at the macro level, at the societal, yeah, it would be language learning. But how can you then, how would you measure it? How do you need to find a way of getting the data, of analyzing it. And I think most people in activity theory would tend to be quite clear about what are the limits, the boundaries of the system. And I think that's why, but I agree with you, at the full collective system, yes, it would be language learning. But if you look at the literature, the boundaries are very flexible, and that's one of the big issues. Like the same way that an operation is very often an action that has been internalized, because the operation becomes unconscious and routinized. And if the conditions change, it has to come back to your consciousness again. Like for me, I mean, the example I use a lot is when, I use a new computer. Well, here at least it's the same keyboard, but when I move from Ireland to France, to here or whatever, my touch typing goes all over the window. I have, it's completely operationalized, routinized. I'm not even aware of it. And then the conditions change, and it comes back to the consciousness level, and it becomes an action. And depending from what you're looking at, you see, for us, yes, maybe the activity is language learning in general. For the learner at this given point, it could be, the activity could be just this. So I think we need to be very clear, because this flexibility of boundaries is one real problem to get solid data and to be convincing the same way when, most of the activity theoretical studies would be to look at contradictions. But what are contradictions? Contradictions, you have to be very clear about your boundaries, and then it's not conflict. It's not, the students say, I don't like that. That's not where the contradiction is. We need to go deeper to find, that's a symptom. So I think that's one of the tricky bits. And that's why I think it takes so long to be adopted by a lot of people. But I think there's still some merit in... do you agree with my...
We can talk. But I would like to have a conversation about it. And I do agree with you that, in fact, I don't think I've ever seen a study of activity theory management. I think Maria did the study for activity theory, international students, language, and web-based learning.
But I think the studies I've seen or seen mentioned are all at the microgenesis level, which is the moment-to-moment interaction type of thing. They're not at definitely not at the phylogenesis level, nor at the,
Okay. Okay, one last talk, and then you can ask tons of questions. In the previous talks, I think we've seen clearly that successful integration of technology in language learning requires a holistic approach in order to fully understand what actually learners are doing when they're working with web-based technology. So in the next 20 minutes, we're going to explain the methodology that Marie-Jo and I are using to actually recycle the interaction data that we're collecting into learning processes. In order to do so, we will take you on a small journey from describing the data that we collect, the tools that we use, and the tool that we use to record or capture the interaction. And we'll explain how the data are being recycled into the learning environment in order to bring innovation to either pedagogy or learning or both. Now, we take the view, naturally, that computers now, and more specifically the internet, and I would say any internet-mediated tools, constitute artifacts that require cognitive and functional adaptation to the user. Now, when we're talking about functional, we're talking about development of electronic skills, for instance. So any skills that the users often already have in using computers or internet, etc. Now, research taking the artifact as a point of departure and focusing on how the design affects both the user and the task is not new in itself. And as you can see from the quote here, Norman, whom François quoted as well, remarked that the better understanding of the role played by artifacts was actually critical to the improvement of design, so in our case, core design. This is an important concept for the development of core tool, and clearly we can't ignore the effect that new system or new e-learning task may have on learners at both a cognitive and functional level. Along the same line of thought, Felix in 2005 stated that research in core should also focus on the process of learning rather than simply outcomes. She pointed out, for instance, on the need to record what is really happening during an intervention, and Marie-Jo will give you example of intervention, as being as essential as actually studying the effectiveness of the tool. In the same idea, Fisher did a survey of computer tracking in core and concluded that computer tracking used as a method to obtain direct and objective feedback on learner behaviors while both users are at task was a valid ethnographic method to actually better understand how students use software as opposed to how we think they're using them or how we want them to use them. Emar in 2003 warned core developers against putting too much focus on the perceived technological potential, and we've talked about that this morning during the roundtable and in the previous talk. So in sum, by calling on the participation of all actors, and we're talking about learners and instructors, we can offer an attractive solution to core tool and task development. Don't you have my paper? That's okay. So actually, Marie-Jo, I'm going to give the microphone to Marie-Jo, and she's going to give you more detail on the educational ergonomic approach, which is the approach that we're using to collect our data and doing our integration. So I have to pass that to you. Okay. I'll leave it in my pocket.